There is nothing wrong with tolerance. There's nothing wrong with tolerating other people who are different from you, other people who behave in ways that you don't particularly agree with or even necessarily approve. There's nothing wrong with tolerance. But there is something wrong with encouragement. Let me give you an example. Suppose you see some fat person, some enormously fat person. I mean, just fucking a land whale, right? I mean, some porker the size of a house. You see them walking down the street, and their behavior has led to them to be fat, right? Is there anything wrong with that? Well, it's very unhealthy. It's very bad for society because these very fat individuals wind up costing us all a great deal of money insofar as taxes and the healthcare system and what have you, right? But you tolerate it. You tolerate it and you say, fine, that person is enormously obese, fine, I'll tolerate it. But should you allow that person to go around and say that, thin people are bad? That being fat is good? Should you? Should you accept that? No, of course not. See? Somebody who's fat, somebody who's morbidly obese, there's nothing good about that. Objectively, by any metric, it shouldn't be encouraged. And yet this notion of fat positivity, body positivity, and crap like that, it's basically saying that. It's basically saying, no, that we should allow it and we should encourage it. We should encourage young people who might be overweight, who are unable to control their food intake, because after all, the only way you get fat is by eating too much. Well, we're telling young people that it's okay. It's okay to succumb to gluttony and balloon into some 500-pound land whale. But it's not okay. It's not okay at all. On the contrary. See? Because it hurts those young people. Those young people who might be, hefty, and who, with exercise and the right diet, would be of a more normal range, within a more normal range. And that's what we want. But we're so afraid of coming across as intolerant that rather than stand up with some self-confidence and say, this is right and this is wrong, this weight is appropriate and this weight is completely inappropriate, rather than say that, we sort of like sit back and just allow things to happen. Allow things to happen without standing up. Without standing up for what is right. I'm giving an example here of the fat acceptance movement, but I'm not shitting necessarily only on the fat people. There are a whole bunch of movements that are perversions of tolerance, whereby we tolerate certain behaviors in individuals, but in our desire to be seen as tolerant, we refrain from criticizing when these people who deviate from the norm start spreading the notion that their deviation is normal and try to convince other people of the normality of their deviance. There is nothing wrong with being normal. Let me repeat that. There is nothing wrong with being normal. It is perfectly fine to be of an appropriate weight. It is perfectly fine to be mainstream in your tastes in whatever. It is perfectly fine to not succumb to deviancies or decadences of various sorts because they disgust you or repel you. But the fact of the matter is that so many deviances and decadences of our society, well, those practitioners of that, they have confused the wider society's tolerance of that behavior into tacit encouragement of that behavior. And those who are deviant, those who are decadent, those who are acting in ways that are wrong for the individual and wrong for the society, well, they're being allowed to run around and proselytize to everyone that this is a good thing. It's not. It's not. And we should have the moral self-confidence to say so. And those who claim that we are intolerant, we should say, no, we are tolerant. We are tolerant of individuals who act in this way. but we are not willing to accept encouragement, especially of the young. I mean, that's the thing that really chaps my ass. You know, like say, I remember when I was 15, 16, 17, 20, I didn't know shit from Shinola. And I succumbed to a whole host of fashions that, thank goodness, when I was young, those fashions were trivial. You know, like I grew up in the 80s. I grew up with a big shoulder pads and crap like that, and it was stupid fashions that now make me cringe. But it was just fucking fashion, thank goodness. Nowadays, we are encouraging young people to be transsexual when they are slightly unsure of their sexuality, as all young people are. We encourage them and push them in directions that are completely wrong. They are completely wrong in the short term, and more importantly in the long term, because encouraging in the direction of a lot of these decadences and deviancies is only going to wreck their lives. And I see so many people today falling for fashions because they don't want to seem intolerant. They are so terrified of being perceived as intolerant that they are willing to put their own children up on a sacrificial altar of tolerance and murder their children. Murder them in every way but the physical. That's what they are doing. They are murdering the lives, the future of their own children because they're afraid of being labeled intolerant. This is unacceptable. We who are the adults, we have to stand up. We have to say no. We have to say this is wrong. We have to distinguish between what we will tolerate and what we will encourage. And we have to recognize that there are deviances, abnormalities, things that are outside of the norm, that we will tolerate in individuals, but we will not allow or encourage among the general population, and most especially not encourage among the young who need guidance. That's the thing that seems to be going on, is that, see, the adults in the room, the adults in our society today, they have rescinded their responsibility of guiding the young, of guiding them and telling them, you know, this is good and this is bad, and this might sound fun for now, but in the future it'll cause problems. We who are the adults seem to have rescinded this responsibility. And it is a sacred duty of the older members of society to tell the younger people how things are. But the fear of being labeled intolerant has paralyzed us. And it's been used by a lot of these people who are decadent, who are abnormal, who are acting in ways that are really disgusting and despicable. It's been used by this class of people. It's a form of manipulation. It's guilt tripping. That's what it is. It's shaming people and creating a virtue out of something that isn't really a virtue now, is it? Because tolerance is not a virtue. Tolerance is simply a quality that we have all agreed to share so that we can get through a very heterogeneous society and live with one another. But it's not a virtue. As I'm doing this video, I'm realizing that I'm not going to be able to release it on my main channel because I'm going to be labeled all kinds of things. And this is the tragedy, right? This is the tragedy, that we can't speak our minds nowadays. We cannot. We have to be oh so careful about what we say, because we have become tolerant of all deviance, but intolerant of intolerance, intolerant of people who want to draw a line. In my own case, I draw lines all the time. In my own personal life, insofar as the people around me, yes, I tolerate certain behaviors, but other behaviors, I either do not tolerate them outright, or make it clear that I tolerate it, but do not encourage it, and do not endorse it. I think that's the healthy approach. And I think that the healthy approach is to listen to your feelings. I have always said that the most important thing is to listen to your reason, your logic, your learned experience before making any decision. And this is true. But when you feel that some behavior is wrong, when you feel that certain behaviors, certain attitudes, certain actions are just wrong, You might not be able to articulate why you think that they are wrong. And that's all right. Because sometimes, between knowing that something is wrong and being able to verbalize it, there's a bit of a stretch. And that's perfectly fine. But if you feel this way, you should call a halt to it. You should say, no, this is wrong, and I won't accept it. And you should have self-confidence. And you should not allow yourself to fall for the trap of thinking that, I'll allow it or else people will say that I'm intolerant. If people think that you are intolerant, what you should do is very simple. You just turn your hand around, raise up your middle finger, and say, fuck off.